I think we're in the midst of a transition in terms of what humans are used to. We're seeing this with self-driving cars. So self-driving cars are already significantly safer. Significantly. We could save thousands of lives every day in America if we banned driving today. But we're not going to do it, not because the technology's not there, because humans aren't there.
Welcome to Thinking Through.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Woohoo. Okay, so as we begin and start digging in, I'm really curious about what's been on your mind lately. You know, what part of this ever-evolving, ever-changing conversation around AI and education are you most drawn to right now?
So I just spent a couple weeks in China and Hong Kong, where they have a mandated AI introduction by the fall. I was at medical school. We got to have AI in the medical curriculum by the fall. Colleges, and of course, lots of electric cars and batteries. They make it. They're very connected. AI is a part. When I asked the question, I went to 100 campuses this year.
Whoa!
How many of you are using AI? In these workshops? And, I get half the hand. How many of you use AI weekly, monthly? In China, every single hand goes up. Everybody using DeepSeek, 100% of the hands.
And you don't see that in the campus tours that you do. You see kind of. Really, even now, a couple years in?
So that leads me to the thing that I think is most damaging at the moment. So, I keep this website, this teachingnaked.com website, and there are now 2,000 models. And so most people have heard of ChatGPT. And so, I try to keep up, which is impossible, with the top 100. But I think that people need to start recognizing that most of the work is not going to be done with ChatGPT. But the models that you're going to be using are Future House, are Sesame. I mean, the models that I'm using are not, they include, RAG or CAG or some other sort of process to make the answers. Doctors, I was at a medical school. And so people will say, oh, well, it hallucinates. It doesn't. I said, well, if you're using ChatGPT and you don't ask it to search, and even if you use the search button, but if you take an AI and you train it with hundreds of thousands of patients, and then you give it access only to PubMed and to medical diagnostic tools and the X-ray and the scans and the radiologist. Now, all of a sudden, it's better than humans. Does it never hallucinate? No, but it gets way more accurate. So people's impression of what AI can do, based upon even the paid models, I think, is not sufficient.
And how does that? I'm just thinking, bringing it into education, in the space where, as we're going to see more and more specialized bots, and we're going to need.
No, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think it means that faculty will be creating bots for students. And so it's like, oh, I've noticed you're struggling. You didn't take the prerequisite. I've made a specialized tutor for you so that you can learn how to do chemistry without because you didn't take calculus or bio or whatever. I customize all of my assignments already. That's not bots, but that's using AI to do something I couldn't do 6 months ago or a year ago. I think we're going to see a lot of assessments replaced with customized bots. Not going to give you a midterm this semester. I'm going to let you talk to Einstein, and Einstein is the thermodynamics module, and he's going to give you questions, and he'll also give you some help if you're struggling. But once you've convinced Einstein that you've mastered chapter 5, you will go on to chapter 6. So you've got to do this by Monday. So it's like the midterm in terms of its timed, et cetera. But instead of having everybody take the same midterm, everybody has a unique experience talking to this bot, which I then have a record of, so I know what questions you asked, I know how you interacted with it. And it's not impossible to cheat, but the truth is it's never been impossible to cheat. The industrious student will write things on the back of their hand or their shoe or whatever, and so we've always had that. But I think we're going to shift from I've got to catch you using AI to cheat to I'm going to use AI to make better teaching materials, better tools, more interesting things for students to do, more customized materials. And so I do think that shift is starting to happen. It's certainly starting to happen in business. I think we're in the midst of a transition in terms of what humans are used to. We're seeing this with self-driving cars. So self-driving cars are already significantly safer. Significantly. We could save thousands of lives every day in America if we banned driving today. but we're not going to do it, not because the technology's not there, because humans aren't there. And so I think, how we interact with bots is going to depend on how we feel about them. And so at the moment we're confused. And look, we have plenty of reason to be nervous. These bad things are going to happen in the same way that bad things are going to happen when robots drive cars. And so I think it's no longer whether I will use AI or not. It's how will I use it? What are the right tools? And I think a lot of people are still not yet on board.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about how to invite that discussion in the classroom. I've been thinking about a lot in my courses of inviting the spaces for resistance to come forward, that techno anxiety to come forward, to have a space to name. I mean, I have my students who are early adopters who are all in, but I also have students who don't know even how to voice their resistance in that space. And I think it's all a part of what you're saying, because if our mindset needs to catch up and we need to grow that in order to shift, it also requires the psychological safety and trust to invite those into the space too.
It does, but I also think, we have an obligation to make sure our students are well prepared for to thrive in the future. And those without AI and who are reluctant to use AI are going to have a much harder time finding a job. And so I do think, look, there are a lot of good examples. The calculator's not a perfect example. Yes, I've heard that. But it is a good example of some things. You shouldn't use a calculator when you're first learning to add, right? You should learn how to add. So the calculator did not change the need to learn how to add. But there are no accountants, none, in the world who don't use spreadsheets and computers and calculators. And you wouldn't hire an accountant who could do that. They couldn't possibly do your taxes on a piece of paper without a calculator. So the question the calculator raises is, when do I introduce the calculator? Not if, but when. Yeah. What do I have students do that's different? So the calculator changed how we taught math. We had to think about when pedagogical challenge, when do I introduce it? So I think for our resistors, look, we need to be concerned about the environment. We need to be concerned about ethics. We need to be concerned about, all the AI spam in the world. But you also need to know that there are going to be times when you're going to need to use it in most jobs, including being a doctor, including being an accountant. And so your boss isn't going to care. And again, one final example, the spell checker. Right? The spell checker doesn't make me a better speller, but it does make my spelling better. So my wife is a spell checker resistor because she doesn't need it. She's a great speller. She doesn't need it. But I need it. So I was an early adopter because I was a lousy speller. So I think we've got to recognize that the people who were not as good at writing or not as good at math or not as good at spelling are the first to say, ooh, this calculator thing is cool. This is fantastic. All of a sudden I can do math. So I worry a little bit that we're letting resistance, we should resist in other ways, but the individual usage is like saying, I'm going to drive my car, but I'm going to be a fanatic about water bottles. I worry that the AI resistance movement has gotten a bit of this, well, I'm not going to use it. But, okay, but policy level, you should be engaged at. But as an individual, you should be worried about what you do and when you do it. But your students all need to have some AI literacy.
Oh, yeah, completely. Well, I'm an AI literacy professor. Be out of a job. But I really agree with you in that we need to shift the mindsets. We need to have space where we can have these conversations with it. You talk about how do you need to bring students into the space, into that process. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit, about that, of just sort of whose voices are missing. And to me, and in my practice, it's the students. Like I love including, how do you feel about this? How you're seeing this tech? How are you engaging with this tech? If we're bringing up resistance, okay, cool. Let's just sit with it a little bit. So you have the space to sit with it, but also you get challenged by one another for those who are not in that space, but it's co-creation is what I'm about. So I'm curious what
I like all that. Yeah, no. So first of all, you have to use it to understand that this is the first time in human history that we have created a weird technology that does better when you offer it chocolate. some of the times. That's never happened before. It's just totally weird, right? That shouldn't be the case. And it doesn't always
Wait,
work.
what do you even mean? Okay, offering it chocolate. Okay,
just say, hey, could you give me a better answer if I offered you chocolate?
Yeah.
We'll often change the answer. And it doesn't always work. But the fact that it ever works is just weird, right? Or if you don't give me a better answer, I'll unplug you or something. That kind of treating it like a human, and it doesn't have emotions. It's not human. But when you threaten it or you say please, even, again, this whole thing about whether you should say please and thank you. Well, that's because sometimes it works. Not generally with please, but that's weird. So students have to understand that this is a whole new phase of human development, a whole new phase of human thinking. So on the one hand, AI is going to make us all more creative. We should be really worried about that. What does that mean? We should be talking about the fact that human creativity might suffer. We do cognitive offloading. We should be worried about the fact that creativity, we could offload that. On the other hand, if you're stuck and you need 500 new ideas for products, or you need, right? So, yes, AI hallucinates, it makes stuff up. But what do you call a human who makes stuff up?
Yeah.
An artist, right? So it has potential. So you have to be engaged. So yes, resistant, but you have to be engaged with this is a weird new technology that's going to change things. And that ultimately what we call cheating, business calls progress, right? Your boss is going to care less about how you got there. So I think the place that I'm seeing lots of growth across the country is people are starting to think about assignments that allow students to use AI, but to do better work. And so, I often say AI is the new average. It's the new baseline. If you can only do work that's as good as AI, you won't get a job because, right, I would hire AI. So humans now have to do better work than AI, and AI is the baseline, which is scary. But it's an opportunity for faculty to raise standards. So they learn to do work that's better than AI, so they will be able to thrive in the new world.
I also heard you say, resituating it into relationships and this relational learning process. I mean, you mentioned the exams shifting into a custom GPT that would be this relationship that you would be having. At least a relational learning experience of a role playing between Einstein and you and the content. And that to me is a really exciting shift. I hadn't thought about that so much because maybe I'm out of the world of exams. I don't use them in my, I've left that train long ago. But still I'm thinking of my colleagues who do use them. So are you seeing this play out and trend, or is this still like, this is a great idea, we should be moving in this direction? Or are you also hearing teachers being like, yeah, this is how I'm using it to role play?
Yeah, so there's a real paradox here before I answer your question. There's a paradox.
Yeah. Give me the paradox.
Which is that on the one hand, right, relationships have never mattered more. Faculty tend to get this backwards because we're rational, we love ideas. And so we tend to think that if I give you data, I will change your mind. And that doesn't work, right? We know that doesn't work. And if you don't know that doesn't work, right, just look in the White House. That authenticity works, right? People believe that our president is authentic, he speaks his mind, and that gives him influence and power. And it's a demonstration that people don't first say, are these facts right? I will follow the person with the best facts. That's how faculty think we think. But the way we actually think is, who's on my team? Who's my people? Who's speaking for me? You must be telling the truth. The other people must not be, right? And so relationships precede data. So before students learn in your class, they first decide, I trust you. You have my best interest. If you don't care, I don't care.
Yeah.
I have to believe
100%.
that you can. So that happens first. And so we know that matters.
Their instinct for BS is so attuned. I mean, they'll see that busy work, indicator. They're cut through. This person is authentic. I mean, they are right there.
Well, and
when that goes off,
yeah, you can thank the internet and social media for that, right? People say students have a shorter attention span. What they really have is a bigger BS meter. Right? Because when you can scroll forever, you can skip whatever's BS.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
So when they come into your class, they're going, nah, right? So attention, right? Attention is much more of a commodity to be earned. So you're absolutely right. So students have this BS filter, so you have to build this relationship. But here's the problem. AI is already more persuasive than human. It's more patient, right? and again, they've designed this because they want you to use it more, right? So they've designed it in a way to say, oh, you're wonderful. What a great idea. Let's do that, right? And even if it's like, no, that was a terrible idea. But the problem is that AI is already a better companion. And if people start to trust AI more than humans, so again, just think about my AI chatbot. Well, suppose I really like my Einstein chatbot. Why would I go to class, right? So I'm a little worried. Well, I'm more than a little worried because I think it means that if you're a jerk professor, you could really be out of a job because the ability to connect with students as a human just got more important, which means what you know is important, but it's secondary, which is a paradox. So now to your question. So yes, people are doing this. We have our first AI nursing degree, for a fraction of the price that you charge. And so if it works, so A, if students like it, and B, if students end up graduating as better nurses because they spent, and think about it. It's simulations, patients from the first day. It's at your own pace. So you could do it in 6 weeks as opposed to 4 years, right? Not everybody learns at the same rate, but of course, in college, we measure butt time. We don't measure intellectual development. We measure how long you sat on your tuchus. So AI can really measure learning, and so I could do it faster than you could. So if that works, that's going to be an enormous threat. And I think we're going to start to see more alternative degrees that are AI driven. I don't think schools are going to start this, right? We're not going to say, hey, let's create our own competition. What'll happen is some for-profit startup will say, here's a bachelor's degree delivered by AI. And it'll be cheap. But I think, and the students may hate this. On the other hand, some students will like it.
Yeah, but I keep thinking about I don't even know how to form my question. It's almost like, what does that do to us? Is that the culture that we're trying to shift into? I'm trying to imagine for a moment where we get increasingly comfortable with communicating with bots and this relationship. We get lulled into this engagement, this humanized, anthropomorphized engagement. I don't know, Jose, I don't even know where to go with it, because I'm just thinking of like...
You're thinking of that movie Her, and you're thinking of, right, all the bad things that could happen.
Well, not even just the herness of it. It's so much of the relationships are already hard with human to human. Fostering relationships with teacher and student is something that has been this momentum of, okay, we've really need to prioritize and centralize relationships because they are central to the learning process. I mean, it's not divorce or nothing. You have to have a strong relationship and know that. And so I'm thinking of how already relationships among humans are taking a hit. What is going to happen there?
Well, I mean, we've got a foretelling of this with social media, right? And with the connectedness. So what we know is that, right, the suicide rate for teenage girls has tripled since the internet. We know that this online all the time, social bullying, all of that sort of stuff. We also know that, right, students want to break up by text and don't want to talk to each other because breaking up in person is hard. And so we've been given this set of tools that allows people to do things that are easier. That has not made us mentally healthier. I think the same thing could happen here, which is that talking to AI is easier than an AI girlfriend that laughs at all your jokes and gets all your references. And that's going to be easier for some people. For a lot of people, it's going to be very tempting. And so that's why I think we need to think hard about these questions. But I don't think there's any question that this will happen and that right in the same way that social media happened. I mean, think about this. If we went back to 20 years and said, okay, there's this new thing, social media, how do we regulate it? Right? We can't ban it. We don't like to ban things. Individuals should have choice. But what are the ways? Oh, maybe we won't let any 14-year-olds in. Right? How old do we have to be to use social media? Are there some controls that companies should have to put on it so it doesn't do certain things? And what we're seeing in America right now is we're going the opposite way. Right? We're seeing the controls come off. Initially, all of the AI companies were afraid of becoming porn sites. That old joke about the internet was made for porn, and so they don't want, so they wouldn't allow you to talk dirty to. And now, we're seeing the relaxing of those controls in a lot of ways, which I don't think is a good thing. So on the one hand, I think we should be very worried about this and we should be doing things. On the other hand, I don't think the solution to that is to say I'm not going to use AI in the same way that it's not, well, I'm not going to use the internet, but I don't use a lot of social media. So, and I wouldn't want my grandchildren to do that.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's a really hard question. So I do think that relationships, right, that the need to connect with people, right, the need to be nicer kinder to each other, to really have human connection is going to be more important. But it also means, right, why, if I see a friend who's kind of a jerk, or they're not really, I go, I'll talk to my AI, right? There's now an alternative. And so I actually do a session for my corporate clients called Meaningful Conversations, where it's like, small talk is called small for a reason. What would happen if you said to somebody, tell me something. So instead of saying, when you say to meet somebody, say, oh, how many kids do you have? What do they do? Oh, how old are they? How about saying, well, what's important to you about being a parent? Right? That's a different conversation. Tell me what your value, what are the values that you want your kids to learn from you as a parent? That's a way better follow-up conversation than, exchanging of data, which is mostly what we do. We say we're having human connection. Meaningful conversation involves exchange of getting to know your values. What is it that matters to you as a human being? And if I do that, you and I will feel more connected. And that you can't do with an AI in the same way, because the AI doesn't have values, right? It doesn't have all that. So this could make us better conversationalists, but it also means that the people who don't do this well are going to struggle in this new world because everybody will have alternatives. And again, I'm thinking primarily about students and teachers, that if I have a really amazing AI teacher who, by the way, knows what I'm going to do, knows I want to be a dentist, uses surfing metaphors for everything, because that's, right? They talk in a way that I get. They know all my favorite TV shows and they use the right references. A, they're a better teacher, right? And B, I might actually feel differently toward them. And so that's why I want faculty to learn how to make custom bots, because then we'll be in the game and understanding how this technology works.
But it's not just the creating the custom bots. It goes back to what you're saying. If you create this custom bot for your students, but if you're a jerk professor, you still are out of the game.
Exactly. And if I made the world's best custom bot, but you don't trust me when I say, oh, you should try this, right? That's still a matter of trust and of relationship. And so if I don't build that, it's not, none of this will work.
Well, I'm just thinking about also, given all this, are there voices that you, or topics that you want more to be on the table? But are there other things, or are you seeing other kind of, we need to raise this up a little bit more?
Yeah, I do think that, the thing I'm most asked about on campuses is cheating. AI detectors, writing, and that's the thing I most hate to talk about, because it's got everything backwards, right? As you said earlier, students have a high BS meter. If you give them an assignment that they don't think is valuable, they will cheat. Unless you explain to them why this is valuable for you and why it's important for you to do it, they won't do it. So, before I wrote this Teaching with AI book, I wrote a better book called Teaching Change that was too long and it came out during COVID. But it's all about relationships, resilience, reflection. It's about my real job is to get you to change your mind, right? And so my summary of the book in 6 words is, teaching is really about I care, I can, I matter. That students have to feel that they care. They have to feel engagement. This is worth learning. But 2, they have to feel like it's possible, right? I can. If it's too easy, you quit. If it's too hard, you quit. And then 3rd, they have to feel agency. They have to feel like I need to do. Why can't somebody else do this? I could just look. Why couldn't AI do this? I have to believe that my doing it has value. So if we focused on those things, I care, I can, I matter, we wouldn't have to spend as much time worrying about cheating and detectors.
I agree completely. I've been saying this for years, because I think go to the source of what motivates a learner to cheat. What is motivating? Yeah. Or even shift your concept of what is cheating. When I invite the conversations in my course, and we get into the more vulnerable kind of, they can feel like confessions where students are like, use ChatGPT to write this, paper. Okay, well, let's sit with it. Well, let's just talk about what is this tool helping you in a way that maybe, I'm not able to provide? Or what is the environment doing that's creating the space where you need the AI to be the hero and the story because the pressure's on or something,
Well, it's because we've turned it into a transaction.
Yeah.
Students feel if I give you this, and look, students really do believe that you love to read 3-page essays on Hamlet, and that you want the world to have more. But look, let's talk about this. I think the most progressive AI policy in the country is, I was at St. John Fisher in Rochester in New York, and their new policy is no faculty can ban the use of AI in their classroom for brainstorming or getting feedback. You can ban other things, but here's a list of things that you cannot forbid students from doing. Expert users can use AI at the beginning and the end. I still do the work in the middle. It's the sandwich, if you like, right? But when I'm done, what would the opposition say to this? What would somebody from an extreme political view think of this? What would somebody who disagrees with this economic theory think of this? That's a great use of AI. So if a student says they used AI for the paper, it depends on what they did. It's not plagiarism. It's never plagiarism. It's not legally plagiarism. Plagiarism requires a human. You can't plagiarize from AI. You don't have proof. Thirdly, the Copyright Office says you can copyright it, right? It's not plagiarism. It might be cheating. It might be intent to defraud. It might be misuse. It might be over-reliance, right? So we have to have a larger vocabulary. We got to stop talking about, well, you cheated. Well, what did you do? Oh, well, you used AI to do the outline, but then you wrote every word? Okay. You used AI, but you didn't cheat. So we now have to think differently about where we set the boundary. But the boundary cannot be all AI, no AI. What matters to us, back to the calculator, is how did you use it? When did you use it, right? And so we need to be giving guidelines. So rather than saying, I need to have a policy as to when to restrict AI, what we should be doing is, your job as a teacher is to come up with guidelines for how to use AI in a way that's productive, both for the final product and for your learning. Because your boss isn't going to care. Your boss is just going to say, figure it out, get me a better product. So we have to be the people to say, before you use AI, ask this question. Is it going to make you smarter, or is it just going to replace thinking? That's a different way to say use it, don't use it. It's what are the conditions under where AI can make you more creative? So I tell my students, before you use AI, try these 10 different human creativity techniques. The Post-it notes, the point of reference. What would your customer say? What would your opposition, right? Use these techniques. And then when you get stuck, then use AI.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Circling back to that. I know. I always also have some of my colleagues will disagree with this, and it's fine. I have the philosophy of, if I'm going to be using AI and I'm using it for brainstorming and I'm using it to help me in the class, then learners should be too. Otherwise there creates this weird dynamic of use, and then I hear, oh no, the students aren't ready for it. They're not ready to use that AI. It's going to lead them. And I go, how do you know? It's
That's the question.
Yeah.
That is exactly the question. So look, I don't think it would be terrible to say, yeah, you're not ready for this. I'm an expert. I know how to use it well. Okay. But how am I going to become right? But I do think it creates a very weird, I can use it to create your exams, but you can't use it.
Yeah. I can use it to give you feedback, but you can't use it to...
And students have snuffed this out. Students really, really hate this idea that you can use it, but I can't. But I don't think it's impossible to say, well, here are the conditions for good use that I have mastered. But of course, most people who are using it, they haven't mastered them. They're just using their power relationship. If I'm a really good user and I figured out how to do a certain kind of thing, I'm using it to give really good feedback, and I've given it a lot of calibration, and so it works in a certain way. Okay, you can't use it for that until you learn to be just as good. But the same should be true of faculty, right? I would say we should not allow any faculty to use an AI detector who hasn't taken a course to demonstrate that they understand what it actually does. If you want to use it, fine, but you've got to first understand it and make sure you know what it really does and not what you think it does. And so that should be mandatory before you then do this thing that could be potentially really harmful to students. Okay,
so before we close, I have a question that I ask everyone who's been on the show, so get prepared, is, okay, a decade from now, what's a question that you hope we are asking about in regards to AI education?
Well, the question I'm hoping we're asking before 10 years from now is how should we deploy this? Mm-hmm. Again, I think a lot about social media. If we had known what was going to happen, we would have gone back and said, okay, we need to regulate this. We need to think of who uses it and where. And so I think 10 years from now, we will almost certainly be saying, oh, we should have thought of that. We should have recognized that this might happen to people who use this inappropriately or too young, or they're going to have relationships, and et cetera. And I do think we have an obligation to protect young people from this. I think we have to be much more careful about young people, and I think it includes college students. I think if we allow AI to subvert thinking, then we're in real trouble. If we let AI's abilities at creativity and at writing mean that humans are now less able to create and to write, that's a disaster for humanity. And I'm not worried about Christopher Nolan, because he does things nobody else does. But I do realize that those people who do CSI episodes should be more worried, because AI can probably do more creative, interesting, right? That it's just, it depends on what you're doing. And so the same for teachers, right? The best, most relational teachers are going to be fine. And so the question I would ask now is not should we, but how? And where is it appropriate? Where is it not? And in order to do that, we have to be engaged in what it can do. You've got to have a really good sense of what AI can actually do. If you're not scared to death because you've gone, wow, right? My colleague Eddie Watson says, it's like, is it an oh no or an oh yes moment? And if you're not having both of those all the time, oh yes, right? If you've not had dozens of those every day, you're not in the game. It's like saying, I used my dial-up modem and looked at Wikipedia and it was lousy. I don't have to worry about this. You don't have a clue as to what's coming. And so I think if you wait 10 years to get there, you're in trouble, because it's already the case that AI video is everywhere. There's a story the other day about all the elections that have been influenced by AI. It's already here. You can't just put your head in the sand and ignore this. And jobs have already changed. And it's not free ChatGPT. You have to use better. I'm less concerned that you pay for the ChatGPT. I'm more concerned that you actually try specialized models in your field. Future House, if you're a biochemist, if you've not used Consensus or Elicit or Storm from Stanford, you need to try a variety of these sorts of things to get a sense of, well, if I do it in this way, this tool has this. So, and if you my last one is Manus or GenSpark or the Minimax agent, all from China, it turns out. But here are two things I'd have everybody do. One is go to an AI, a free AI will work, Gemini or ChatGPT, turn on the search, right? Search and thinking, and then say, so I'm applying for a job at the University of X. Is there anything that I've posted or written about in the last 20 years that could get me into trouble? Because when I do this, ChatGPT or Gemini searches for José Bowen Gaza, José Bowen Israel, José Bowen Trump, José Bowen Biden, José Bowen controversy. It creates 700 searches for ideas that could be related to controversial topics, and then it searches all of the social media and it then tells me, well, here's what you posted 4 years ago on Twitter, et cetera. Do that for yourself, because you will know what you post, right? You will be able to, you're an expert in the answer, so you have to start with stuff that you know. Then the next thing to try is go to Manus and pick a topic that you know well and say, so what are the trends in my field in the last 6 months? Find all of the papers that have been written about anything like this topic, organize them into files, and then download the PDFs of the papers for me to read. So no holders, right? I want to see the PDFs. And Manus is an agent that can do that. But remember to say this, but I want you to search for this bias, right? I'm a continental philosopher, so search for this bias, or, gender bias or Western bias. Make sure that you do a global search in all countries, in all languages, because now you're going to see things that you wouldn't have found on your own. And once you've done both of those things, I think most people will say, okay, there are some things that I cannot do that AI can do better. And those things are interesting. But if you've just tried to look up your dissertation on, or who won the 1972 World Series, those are stupid questions for AI. Google that stuff. And so you have a really false sense of where the potential is, because it's different. And so the question today is ask different questions of AI than you ask of other technology, because it's weird. It's not like anything you've ever used. And if you're using it like other technologies, you're going to get garbage.
Thank you so much for this time. I'm really grateful that we could dive in.
Well, I hope I didn't say too many things that were stupid, because I try to get things into short form. Sometimes it makes me like, oh, no, wait, I didn't mean to say that. I put 4 things together into one, and they were 4 things. So yes, my apologies.
No apologies needed. No, this was so good and so rich, and I think helps frame the conversation in new ways that I think, at least to me, I was like, oh, this pumps a lot of freshness into the conversation that it's been really stale. I mean, I'm sick of this cheating conversation. It's cheating since I started teaching, close to 2 decades ago. It's been constant, the before times, even before AI, and how fresh you offered that perspective and broke it down, and also getting people out of their own AI tech bubble too. Let's pop it a little bit. Get out of ChatGPT. Go explore.